Welcome to Fintech Confidential, bringing you the people, tech, and companies that change how you pay and get paid.
Welcome to another episode of Fintech Confidential. I'm sitting here with Sherah Spark, the head of compliance and legal for CheckAlt.
Typically, when you talk to people from a risk background, you may think, well, they're going to slow things down, they're going to slow progress down because they want to check all the boxes and do the activities. I think there's a risk-reward balance that you really have to take to when you approach anything, really, but I mean, specifically with the products that we're bringing to market. When I first came into the company, my first question was, aren't checks going away? I was blown away by the statistics of billions of dollars of checks that are written on an annual basis. 46% of people have written checks in the last 30 days. The checks obviously have been around for a very long time. What's new is the technology and the way that these fraudsters are making these deposits. What's not new is they've been taking them through the mail. At CheckAlt, we have to be, as the fraudsters are evolving in their approach and the way that they're, committing crimes, so do we as financial institutions, as financial technology companies, have to be advancing our own approach to combat that. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is using things like blockchain, AI, things that are, again, real time. Technology always, in my opinion, has to be partnered with a human, because we can train AI, we can train machine learning, but there has to be, I think, a human element on the other side. I think maybe eventually we'll get there, but there always has to be a human involved in that equation.
Now let's quickly shine a spotlight on a game changer in the financial world, ClearingWorks. Simplify your financial management with a one-stop solution for all your AR needs and with a single login. Are you intrigued? Visit clearingworks.com to schedule your demo today.
Welcome to another episode of Fintech Confidential. I'm sitting here with Sherah Spark, the head of compliance and legal for CheckAlt. CheckAlt has been releasing some really great products and really moving things forward when it comes to ACH, RDC, Lockbox, e-Lockbox, and remote deposit capture. So all of these things, I know we think about checks going away, but believe it or not, they're not going anywhere. So I'm really glad to have you here today, especially to talk about check fraud, the legal, the compliance, all the stuff that kind of goes around this. But before we dive in, I'd love for you to give us your, as I like to call it, the falling into fintech story. How did you first get into the financial area, and what was the big thing that got you to focus on compliance and risk?
Thanks for having me. I started out my career early on in banking. People say that they accidentally fell into being a banker. I had good intentions to go right into the financial institution. My first role was in the mortgage industry. I was in college, and this was during the mortgage boom, and it was processing loans. And one of the things that I didn't realize at the time was that processing loans, working with the underwriters, really was my kind of first step into working in risk and compliance. Looking at the financial picture of each customer, working with the underwriters to understand if the organization was ready to take on that risk. That was kind of my first exposure to this topic. Fast forward to a couple of years later, I started working on the retail side of banking. And my role was really to prepare the banks for audit. My role was specifically sales and audit, and sales and service, but
Sales and audit.
Yeah,
that's
right.
An interesting combo.
But it's interesting because it teaches you the practices to be aware of, to keep customers safe, to keep the bank safe, all while doing sales practices. It's a genius concept. Now, in execution, there's always a lot of pressure when it comes to sales. But if you can have that compliant mindset, it makes you aware of being careful and being cautious, protecting the company, protecting the customers. In this role, I thought my strength was sales, what I really started to identify is that I really had a passion for the risk side of the role, the risk and compliance. From there, I jumped into the fifth largest bank. In my role there was 6 of us that were at the beginning, at the forefront, pioneering risk and compliance. So this was probably about 15 years ago when it wasn't a buzzword yet. Nobody had really caught on to like this really important aspect of the company.
I think it's interesting you say that, because one of the conversations that I have a lot with my clients is really risk and compliance is a primary focus. And in a lot of cases, they ask me, what should I budget my operating expenditures? What I've seen is about 30% or so of the total budget seems to be what keeps people out of a lot of trouble. And now, mind you, I work with a lot of more aggressive fintechs or banking as a service type products, or things that are really about the money movement. So diving into the AML, BSA, the KYC/KYB space, that's where they spend a lot of their time. How does where you sit and where you came from, does that play a big piece in it as well?
Fast forward to where I am now in fintech, banking has played a role in keeping me very conservative. Seeing what happened to some of the large organizations that I've worked with, how much effort that they put into risk and compliance has helped really curb and mitigate any type of issues that we've had in the past or that some financial institutions have run into. Going back to what I was just talking to you a couple minutes ago, we grew from 6 people to 150 in 2 years from a risk culture. It really changed the way that our organization did business. Working with several bankers now at CheckAlt, we have risk and compliance really ingrained into our DNA, into what we do every day, whether it's from our sales practices to our technology. Having that kind of mindset ingrained in everything that we do, into the fabric of the company, really. Working with other bankers that are now here at this fintech company has helped us to make more strategic decisions and align our approach to how we're making decisions.
When you start to talk about these strategic decisions, bringing in the experience for it, how would you describe your mission and how it fits in with the overarching CheckAlt mission?
I would say one of the unique characteristics of what I bring to CheckAlt is keeping very customer focused. And what I mean by that is, I think typically when you talk to people from a risk background, you may think, well, they're going to slow things down. They're going to slow progress down because they want to check all the boxes and do the activities. I think there's a risk reward balance that you really have to take to when you approach anything, really. But I mean, specifically with the products that we're bringing to market, with the business, how the speed is something I've definitely have had to get used to. Banks are typically slower, right, and more cautious, but bringing that balance of speed and the trade-off of how much risk we're willing to take.
How do you approach that balance? Because it's one of those pendulums, right?
Yeah.
That swings sometimes really fast. How are you maintaining that balance?
Because we're operating so fast, you have to go on information that you know today. Can't predict future. You can bring in your experience into that lens, but I think it's presenting the facts and then working with our executive leadership team to say, based on what we know today, are we willing to take this type of risk? It's a incremental test and learn. A lot of, I think, what fintech is testing and learning, being cautious, but being very calculated at a very fast speed.
As you look at the way that CheckAlt is approaching the market, are there specific things with maybe specific products or specific features within products that you see as a lifeline when it comes to risk and compliance?
As default rates continue to rise and margins compress in lending, financial organizations are searching for solutions to combine that operational efficiency with innovation. Look no further, as LoanPro allows lenders to enhance their origination, servicing, collections, and payments using the foundation of a modern lending core. Check out loanpro.io to learn more about how over 600 financial organizations have modernized their tech stack with LoanPro.
Each one of our products has its own unique identifiers. I would say the way that we're approaching checks is unique in the sense that we are partnering with other technology companies in the industry to bring in what they're doing really well at to help protect our consumers, protect our partners, our business partners that we're looking at, that we're working with. And that lifeline of thinking about risk and compliance and protecting the consumer, protecting the business, I think is because checks are our lifeline to this company. We have to be very diligent in how we're protecting any type of exposure there. When I first came into the company, my first question was, aren't checks going away? I was blown away by the statistics of billions of dollars of checks are written on an annual basis. 46% of people have written a check in the last 30 days. And don't quote me on that, but it's a high percentage, much more than I ever expected. If we can become the best at this corner market and do so with trust and integrity and keeping risk and compliance at the forefront, it's a win-win. It's a win for us because we become a trusted advisor. It's a win for our customer because we're protecting their funds.
It's kind of funny, at least from my perspective, that some of the same tactics from the movie Catch Me As You Can, that was loosely based on Frank Abagnale and his check fraud spree over those years. Some of those things haven't gone away, but not only they not gone away, there are new, different ways that, one, that they're doing the check fraud, and two, how the fraudsters are all kind of coming together. Could you outline the three big areas you're working with here at CheckAlt as far as check fraud goes?
Well, you mentioned Lockbox. That's one of our biggest services here at CheckAlt. And with Lockbox comes a partnership with the U.S. Postal Office. And postal workers are being targeted for things, getting their keys. People are going into the mail boxes and opening up envelopes and taking checks there. I mean, we see a lot of check washing.
Can you describe that?
Yeah, so check washing is basically it's either technology or chemicals, and they're taking and lifting the payee typically and the dollar amount off of the check and writing it for a new amount, writing it to a new payee. And what they're doing is they are paying what they call mules or walkers to go into branches to cash check, to make deposits. And then you can also obviously deposit it through a mobile device as well. The checks obviously have been around for a very long time. What's new is the technology and the way that these fraudsters are making these deposits. What's not new is they've been taking them through the mail. So if you think about that, they're just changing the way they're using technology to accelerate how rampant this is. At CheckAlt, we have to be, as the fraudsters are evolving in their approach and the way that they're, committing crimes, so do we as financial institutions, as financial technology companies, have to be advancing our own approach to combat that. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is using things like blockchain, AI, things that are, again, real-time dark web services where we have partners that are going into social media and looking at checks that are being put up for sale on the internet. If you can get ahead and be more proactive in getting ahead of these fraudsters, playing somewhat of a similar game is speed to market, speed to them getting to cash these checks, being able to have access to them in real time. I think that's one of the ways that you can combat this check fraud situation that we have going on.
One of the things that I learned recently from a former FBI agent that honestly didn't cross my mind, because I remember doing RDC 15 years ago.
Yep.
And I remember doing remote deposit capture when it first released. But I never in my wildest dreams had thought that someone was going to take those images
and
then reuse them, for lack of a better phrase, to resubmit them. How much is that actually going on? And what are some of the things that you're seeing the financial institutions as well as CheckAlt do to combat against that?
Because mobile devices are so inexpensive and pretty much anybody can have access to it, think about then the volume of how that transcends into being able to get a check through mail or through however they're getting it, right? And mail, I think, is the biggest piece. Be able to take a picture of it. And then they're also going into computers as well. I mean, we've seen that. So things that we're doing to combat that, I think, again, dark web services, doing an analysis on the check. So there's a couple partners that we're working with that will actually collect data on individual accounts, and they'll be able to analyze, score checks as they're coming into our system. One of the things that we're doing is we have a tool that will score a check. It flags it for fraud or the potential of fraud. And then what we need to do is to analyze, basically it's a yes or no decisioning. It's a decisioning tool is really what it is. Typically, this will look at things, the characteristics on the check based on the information that's in a database that will tell a little bit about the history of the account and the history of the check. So if somebody's writing a check for $500, then they're always writing it out to the same lawn service, and we see an out of pattern check come in, it'll get flagged in the system, and then somebody has to review to accept or deny that deposit or that payment, I should say. So those are just ways in real time that we can put controls in place, because it's all about mitigating risk. You're not going to catch everything, but those are the type of tools and controls that you can use to catch or flag these checks in real time.
We look at the fraudsters at all, right?
Yep.
And you look at procedures and the tools and everything that you have to use. And you've mentioned blockchain, you've mentioned AI.
Yep.
What does the roadmap look like? Maybe, a little roadmap for CheckAlt look like, and how does that stack up against what's going on in the marketplace?
So our roadmap to how we're going to leverage technology is getting to cloud first. I think a lot of those tools will complement, blockchain will complement the cloud technology. The way that I think about it is technology is a way for us to optimize, automate, create efficiencies around some of the manual processes that not only we, but other financial institutions face. I think we are operating in such, we meaning financial industries, banks, are operating on such old systems and old ways of thinking and doing things, not only from a technology standpoint, but from a process standpoint, that we have such an opportunity to catch up with what fraudsters are doing. I think what fraudsters are doing is taking advantage of technology and fast, rapid-paced environment where banks and financial institutions are caught up in bureaucracy and trying to just get something approved. And we're so far behind in that pace where fraudsters are able to take advantage of that weakness from an FI bank perspective and capitalize on this whole check fraud industry. The way that we're thinking about differently is if we're a financial technology company and we're not large, how can we start to operate in an environment and take advantage of not having to go through tons of red tape, tons of bureaucracy, so that we can rapidly protect our customers with new tools that are in the cloud, that are automated, that are AI, that are blockchain. And the advantage of being a smaller company is that we don't have to run through that red tape. We can partner with others that are like-minded, again, speed to market on these, and to keep up with the rapid speed of what's going on the other end, which is the fraud, which is the fraudsters take advantage of technology for their benefit.
Are there any partnerships that you guys have put into place that are really reducing some of or mitigating some of the risks? I would assume at the same time that allows you to offer new features and functions.
Most of the partnerships are to be announced.
I tried to get it out of you. Is there any that you can talk about? Let's go there. Which ones can you talk about?
Let me talk about the features, because I think that's the most important part. We can do things like account authorization. One of the challenges with check fraud is account authorization, account balance. We have the ability to understand if there's an account takeover or an unauthorized transaction, if things look like they're out of pattern. Other tools that we can use is the dark web partnership, where they can flag checks that are out there for sale. that might have come in through our system. So those are just kind of a couple examples. The scoring system is another thing, right? Understanding if there's a partnership that we're working with is looking at scoring checks as they come into our system. And there's, I think, 26 to 30 different characteristics that they're looking at that will help indicate whether or not there's potential fraud. In the end, technology always, in my opinion, has to be partnered with a human, because we can train AI, we can train machine learning, but there has to be, I think, a human element on the other side. I think maybe eventually we'll get there, but there always has to be a human involved in that equation.
It's amazing how we've gone from it being an idea to trying to figure out how to use it to minimize the repetitive tasks that we all do. And you hit on something that's a really big piece for me, is that human reason. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing that, if you look at all the artificial intelligence technologies that are out there, that's the one thing it can't do. Yeah. It can't do the human reasoning. It can look at patterns. It can look at different things. It can synthesize, and it can tell you what it sees, but it can't reason to what that actually means and what you should be doing about it. Yep. So I think that's one of the big pieces that is still open. And one of the things that I've heard multiple times recently is we have to stop looking at AI as being a human replacement.
Agree.
And being more of human augmentation. And on that same topic, how are you, from the risk and fraud side of the house, approaching or looking at it? Are you looking at it it sounds like you're looking at it from the augmentation side of the house. How do you see it augmenting? Maybe not today, but in the near future.
I see it as a tool for speed, right? So we only have so many hours in the day, only have so much attention span, brain power capacity. I think technology can be used as a tool to help present data, but in the end, it has to come down to what is our risk appetite.
Support provided by Skyflow. What if you could build fast but not break privacy? What if you could ensure data privacy, governance, and compliance with just a few API calls? What if you could worry less about PCI requirements while actually improving privacy and security? How much more time would your team have to truly innovate? How much faster could you build and ship new features? How much more powerful could your app be? Skyflow is a zero-trust data privacy vault delivered as an API. Skyflow's radically simple design lets you collect, secure, and tokenize personal information like card data and payment details. And with built-in features like encrypted data analysis and sharing, anonymization, and advanced governance, your days of choosing between data security and data usability are over. Whether you're just concerned with PCI compliance or need to go further to include CCPA, GDPR, SOC 2, and beyond, Skyflow has you covered. What if you could build fast but not break privacy? With Skyflow, you can. Visit skyflowsecure.com today to learn how.
What is the company or the individual or the partnership willing to take on from a risk appetite standpoint? What type of risk framework are you dealing with? You look at things like scoring and, checks that are coming in. Some may have tolerance for an 80% risk score. Some may have tolerance for other things. But I think in the end, each financial institution, fintech, has to understand what their risk appetite is, what the framework is that they're working with, and use technology as a tool to help drive those decisions. Some of it's going to be on data analytics, but are you working with good data? Is the data clean, right? Because if you don't have clean, solid data, then your outputs are going to be false negatives potentially, or false positives. There's got to be that human element to it, right? And as much as data and technology can help present information, some of it at the end of the day is going to be based on things like intuition and gut feeling and all those things that we can't always quantify.
So it's kind of an extension of the trust but verify type thing. Trust that it's giving you the information you need to look at, but verify that the information it's giving you is actually what you need to move forward.
Yeah, and there's things like, predictive analytics too, right? When we talk about fraud that play into it. But I think at the end of the day, there's got to be the human element on the end. So our roadmap looks like cloud technology. It looks like partnership with those friends that are in the industry that do really well at that. We don't want to become a fraud expert, but we want to partner with those that can protect CheckAlt and protect our customers.
So I'm going to ask one more time. Are there any partners we can talk about? Is there anybody that we can point out specifically that's really helping you in this?
Okay, so we can talk about Grail Pay.
Okay.
So
what is Grail Pay and how are they helping you?
We're testing out use cases right now. One of the, I think, Wild West features out there or methods of payment.
I love that you called it a Wild West feature or method of payment, but continue.
Is instant payments. I mean, when I think about fraud, I think about this is a perfect example of where fraudsters can come in and easily move money. I don't know if there's a lot of really great controls around instant payments today, but Grail Pay is one of those companies that we're working with on different use cases to look at features and tools that they have to help us make our decisions around instant payments.
Instant payments is a unique space, especially for us here in the U.S. I mean, it's been in Europe, or I should say Great Britain, for many years.
Yeah.
And here in the U.S., we're still trying to figure out how do we make it work? How to make it work within the frameworks that we have today? Yeah. Can we make it work within the frameworks we have today? And then not only that, we didn't get one way to do it, right? We've gotten from the card brands, we have instant payments. We've got from the clearinghouse, they have their own version of instant payments. Then you've got the Fed that launched with their version.
Yeah.
And they all kind of are going after the same problem, but in completely different ways. And I can only imagine how complicated that makes it for you when you're trying to figure out how do I mitigate the risk and how do I maintain compliance? Is there something that Grail Pay is doing that would help you with that? Or is it just augmenting some of the things you're already doing?
I think it's augmenting some of the things we're already doing. When I think about instant payments, I think about from a merchant standpoint, I think about people's ability to set up businesses. There could be loopholes there, right, around merchants or pretend merchants being able to set up these companies and then being able to make instant payments, right? So one of the things that, again, we're looking at multiple use cases on how to implement Grail Pay's tools within our risk management framework, but one of them is like account authorization and, again, historical lookbacks on if you're getting an instant payment. I'm just making this up for $5,000, but that's not a usual activity within that company. Like, we have the ability to look at, with their help, transactional history to make sure there's nothing that's out of line or out of pattern. So having that access to a consumer or business account, I think will be huge and helping mitigate some of the fraud that I see could be happening. But I don't know if anybody's really figured out how to manage fraud around instant payments. So we're pretty excited to partner with Grail Pay to use some of their capabilities in the instant payment space.
What if I was a company that hadn't really been looking at anything other than just physical checks, and I start to get into the ACH or start to get into the Lockbox or the e-Lockbox functions? Is there any advice that you would give to those FIs or non-FI companies on how to approach their problems around risk and compliance in those spaces?
Each FI and bank is going to have a little bit of a different pain point. So some of it could be operational risk. Some of it could be product risk, failure to launch. Some of it could be people risk. So each company is going to have a different, I think, pain point when it comes to risk around Lockbox, around the different products. My advice would be to identify what those pain points are and to think about the strategy behind how to mitigate, if it's operational risk. So to talk about Lockbox, for example, if you think about the number of processing errors understanding the metrics around what those errors are, and then, finding a plan or a way to mitigate, operating errors. If it's remote deposit capture, you can have errors there as well. It's what is the technology that you're using to capture the characteristics and images of the check, right? Does your software work? What type of software are you using? So one of the tools that we use has very low error rates when it comes to, picking up the images on the actual check itself. So again, I think going back to what is the problem that you're trying to solve, identifying your risk that way, and then looking for strategies or ways to mitigate it.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that, I just got to talk about this one thing? Is there anything that we've missed that you want to make sure that the audience hears?
CheckAlt has the talent and the expertise around it today that really is supercharging it to be a company that is, first, best in class. We've got the experience and the talent behind us that is going to help us navigate into the future, whether it's risk and compliance, whether it's, operational excellence. That I think if financial institutions are looking to partner with an organization that really is investing in its talent to become best in class, I think they'll be happy with the results that they get in that partnership. When we say about we put people first, we put our customers first, I think they'll find that in their experience with the CheckAlt organization that it's really genuine and authentic, and they'll know that from the time that they meet us throughout the whole life cycle, right? It's not just at the time of sale. I think people here in the company really have a genuine interest to do the right thing, provide great customer service. We're putting a lot of care into risk and compliance throughout the organization. So again, it becomes really the fabric of who we are. Risk and compliance isn't sexy. It's an insurance policy, so to speak, but it's all about what's doing the right thing so that we can invest not only in today, but into our future. So I think that's what our customers or prospects will find when they come up with that.
I appreciate the time you've taken out to sit down here with me. It's been really insightful to understand and learn from you throughout the day today. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to sit down and chat with me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
As we wrap up today's episode, I've got one last thing for you. If you're in the trenches fighting fraud and financial crime, it's a complex battlefield. That's where Hawk's AI tools for real-time payment screening, AML, transaction monitoring, and dynamic customer risk rating come into play. These aren't just buzzwords, they're game changers designed to make your compliance more effective and less of a headache. Imagine slashing through false positives with precision and giving your compliance strategy the edge it needs. Head on over to GetHawkAI.com to sign up for a demo and discover how their platform can revolutionize how you fight fraud and financial crime.
This has been a production of DD3 Media, with all rights reserved. This is provided for informational purposes only. It is not offered or intended to be used as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. We strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, but will not be responsible for any missing facts or inaccurate information. You comply and understand that you should use any of this information at your own risk. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile financial assets, so research and make your own financial decisions.